Hello there and welcome back. In the previous episode we created these status bars. We have a health bar, a calories bar, and a hydration bar. And right now they all can deplete according to their own logic, but there is no way to refill them, right? Usually we want to be able to eat something, drink something, and it will refill these bars. So in this episode we're going to add an option to click on an item inside our inventory, and then we're going to refill these bars according to the specific item we clicked on. And another thing we want to add today is the option to delete our items, right? Because usually in survival games, you walk around, you find a bunch of things, and then your inventory is filled. And then you can find something that is better than the other items, and you have to choose between what to throw away and what to keep. Of course, we can also have an option to sell our items, but if you're inside a dungeon or a forest, you don't have a way to sell your items, so you really have to choose between what to keep and what to throw away. So we want to add this option to just delete items from our inventory. And another thing we're going to do in this episode is the option to hover over our items with the mouse. And then when our mouse is over the item, we're going to display some information about this item. For example, the name of the item, the description, the functionality of the item. We just want to give the player more information about specific items because the player will not know what all of these items are doing. So it's a good way to interact with these items. So we're going to start with the last thing I mentioned. We're going to add some kind of panel over here that will show information about specific items when we hover over them with the mouse. So first of all, we're going to go into our inventory screen and we're going to add an object and we're going to call it item info panel, okay? And then we're going to move to our scene. We're going to click on the panel and we're going to position it underneath the inventory. Of course, in your game, it depends on the way your UI looks. So now I'm going to just position it underneath the inventory. And then I'm going to add an image component. And I'm going to add one of the boards that I have. Let's say this one, okay? The next thing we're going to do is add the different information that is going to be displayed over here. So inside the item info panel, we're going to create an item called item name, item description, and item functionality. Okay, and then we're going to simply position them over here and we're going to give them some kind of different font, different colors. Again, it will depend on your UI. So this part is less relevant for you. So all I did was adding a text component to each one of these items and I played a bit with the styling. Now we want to make it work. We want to create a script that will change these placeholders into the different names and descriptions of the items that we have in the inventory when we hover over them. So to do that, we're going to go into our scripts folder and we're going to create a script called inventory item. I already have this entire script over here. I'm going to provide it to you in the description section of this video. So you don't have to type everything down. You can just copy the entire thing. So at first, this class may seem a bit intimidating because of the amount of code inside, but there's actually nothing too complicated here. And I'm going to explain to you everything line by line. So all you need to do is to create a script called inventory item and paste all of this code inside. So this script will be placed on every item that can be stored inside our inventory system. And if you're asking yourself, why not write this code inside the drag and drop script? Because the drag and drop script is also placed on every item inside our inventory. But that's just because it's good practice to separate between different features. Even if we can do it in the same script, we don't want to put a lot of code together, and we want to follow the principle of single responsibility. So it's a principle that says you want every class and every method to be responsible for only one thing, or things that are related to one subject. So this will deal with the actual items inside the inventory, and the drag and drop script will deal with the dragging of the items inside our inventory. Okay? Even though both of these scripts will sit on our items. So before I'm going to start explaining everything, let's just go back into the editor and let's go into our prefabs, the resources. So these are the items that can go into the inventory, right? So we're going to select all of them, and we're going to go here, add component, and we're going to add the inventory item. So now it will add the script to each one of these items. Okay, so we have the drag and drop script and we have the inventory item script. So first of all, we're going to deal with the UI, right? With changing the item name, item description, and item functionality. And later I'm going to explain to you the rest of the code. So we have a Boolean that tracks the state of if this item is trashable, right? So this is not related to us right now, but we want to focus on this part. So first of all, we're going to have a reference to this item info UI. And this is this item info UI panel that we created over here. We want to have a reference to it so we can go and have a reference to the children. And then inside the children, we can also have a reference to these text components, and we are going to be able to change the values over here. So this is what we have here. We're going to have a reference to this panel, and then we're also going to be able to reference the children. So these are all the text components of these children. And then we also have these strings over here that will contain the values of the name, description, and functionality. So for example, on the X item, this name will be X, this description will be something like, this is a tool to chop wood, and functionality will be something, use it on trees to gather wood, or something like that. Okay, so this will store the values of each item, but this is just the text components. So now we want to be able to hover over these items with our mouse, and when our mouse enters into this area, then we want this panel to appear, right? And then we want these values to change according to the item's values. So first of all, this item info panel will be invisible. So to trigger this kind of event, when our mouse hovers over an item, we need to implement these two interfaces, iPointer enter handler and iPointer exit handler. So when we implement these interfaces, we're going to get these two methods over here, okay? Each one has its own method, on pointer enter and on pointer exit. So this method will trigger when our pointer hovers over the item that this script is attached to, okay? And then this method will be triggered when our mouse leaves the area of the item, okay? So when our mouse enters into the area, we first of all want to set this item info UI to be active. We want to make it visible, right? And then we want to change the name of all of these text components. We want to set the item info UI text component to be equals to this name, and the same way with the others. So if this name is X, then it will change the text component, and over here we're going to see X, okay? So that's what's going to happen. And then when our mouse exits this area, we want to set the item info UI to be false. We don't want to see it anymore, right? Because when we stop hovering over a certain item, then we want to make this panel invisible. So this is all that is required to make this feature available, okay? But there's another catch here. And the catch is that we need a reference to this item info UI. And because this inventory item is not a singleton, and it's a script that will basically sit on prefabs, okay, we cannot drag this item info panel over here, okay? We cannot do it. Of course, we set it to private, but also if it was public, it wouldn't work because that's not the way we can create references, okay? So to fix this problem, we need to create a reference to this item info panel inside our scene. And the way we're going to do it is basically creating a reference inside our inventory system, because our inventory system is a singleton and it's always here. So we can create some kind of reference inside the inventory system, and then we can reference it by calling this instance, okay? So let's go to our inventory system, and we're going to create a reference to this okay? So now that we have this reference here, we can take this item info panel and we can drag it into our item info UI. Okay, so now we have this permanent reference over here, and inside our inventory item, at the beginning, at the start method, we can go inside our inventory system instance, item info UI. I called it item info UI. And then we're going to get a reference to this object. And after we got this reference, we can also get the references of all the children. So we are going to be able to reference this and then find the children. And inside these children, we're going to be able to find the text component and change the text over here. So now it should work. And of course, before we run the game, we need to go into our resources and set the values. So for the axe, we can place this name to be axe, description, a sharp tool. And then functionality used to chop down trees. Okay? Again, we're going to think about something more creative later. So the axe is done. Then we're going to do the same thing with the stick. Stick, a dry stick. Used for crafting. Okay, and then stone, same thing, used for crafting. Stone, a simple stone. Okay, and now we can run the game. So now we need to pick up a stone and a stick. And then when we hover over the stick, it opens this panel and it shows the values that we inserted. Stick, a dry stick used for crafting. And then when we exit this area, it disappears. And the same thing with a stone. Stone, a simple stone used for crafting. And also if we're going to craft the axe, it will do the same thing. So now you need to add descriptions and functionalities to every item that you're adding to your game. Okay, but that's a nice way to interact with the items. The next thing we're going to deal with is the consumption of items. So everything is still inside this inventory item script. So we know what this does, right? It takes care of the UI. And now we're going to deal with this part. So first of all, we're going to have a reference to a game object that is the item that we want to consume. Because when we're going to click on an item, it will be destroyed. So before we destroy it, we want to say that this is the item that will be destroyed. And I'm going to show you exactly why we need to keep a reference to that. Then we're also going to have a bool that will track if this item is consumable or not, because we don't want to be able to consume everything. some items like tools will not be consumable, right? So we want to have a flag on each item that is consumable. And then we will have these floats that will contain the effect of consuming this item. So for example, water will have a hydration effect of something, right? 20. And then a steak will have maybe 300 calories. And then some kind of medicine will increase our health. So this is where we're going to assign the different effects of consuming this item. And of course it's public because we want to set these values inside the inspector. So now in order to be able to click on these items, right click on these items and consume them, we need to implement more interfaces to trigger these events. So we're going to implement these two interfaces, iPointer down handler and iPointer up handler. So this basically tracks the events when we click on the object or when we release of the clicking, okay? So we're going to get these two methods, this one and this one. So this will trigger when we click on an item, and this will trigger when we release the button, okay? And it's important because we need to do a lot of checks over here. So this we know what it does. It's related to the UI. And these are the two new methods. So on pointer down is when we click on the item, but we want to only allow a right click, right? Because usually it's a right click and then you can consume the item. So we're going to say if the event data button equals to input button right, it means if we click with our right mouse button, then we need to do another check, and we're checking if this item is consumable, because we have this boolean here that we're going to set for every item. Some items will be inside the inventory, but they're not going to be consumables. So we're not going to say that it's true. So we check if this item is consumable. And if he's also consumable, then we're going to consume it. So first of all, we're going to say that this specific item is the item that we want to consume. So we're going to save a reference inside this item pending consumption variable, okay? Because if we're going to have two apples inside our inventory and we're going to click on one of these apples, how will it know that we want to consume this specific apple and not the second one, right? So we want to say that we want to consume this specific apple. So that's why we keep a reference for it over here. And then we're simply triggering a method that will do the calculation for the effects, right? It will add health, it will add calories, and it will add hydration, okay? And we simply pass as arguments these variables that we set over here, the health effect, calories, and hydration. Maybe this apple will not add to the hydration, so it's going to be 0, but calories will be 30. So that's why we pass these arguments over here, okay? But before we get to this consuming function, let's see what happens when we release the button. So first of all, we check if it was a right click, and then we check that this item is consumable, because if we right click or just click on an item that is not consumable, we don't want to delete it. We don't want to trigger anything. So we check if it's consumable, and if the item pending consumption, this one is the same as this one. You understand? Because this method will be triggered on any item, and this method will get triggered on any item. So this item is not always this item. So we need to make sure that if we're consuming this item, we also want to check that it's exactly this item. Otherwise, it will destroy some other object. Because what will happen is that we click on this apple, and then we release the button, but it will delete the other apple, right? Because the script is sitting on all of the apples. So here we're checking if this game object is also this game object. And if it is, and everything is true, then we're going to destroy this game object, okay? And the reason we use destroy immediate is because if we just use destroy, it will wait for the next frame to destroy this item. But right after this destroy, we need to recalculate the different lists. So if we're going to wait until the next frame, these methods will run before the next frame. The crafting system and the inventory system will think that this item still exists, right? So when we say destroy immediate, we mean destroy it now. Don't wait for the next frame, because we want to be able to actually see the UI responding on time. So if you don't remember, these two methods are just methods that we created inside our inventory system and the crafting system. So this method checks that all the items inside the inventory did not change. And if they change, if there's no object inside, then remove it from the list, right? And then the other one checks what are the resources we have for crafting. Another change I did was go into our inventory system, and I did the exact same thing over here inside the remove item, destroy immediate. Okay? Because we do want to recalculate things right after this. So you need to change this in your code if you've been following along, because it's something I did in this episode, okay? It will work with destroy, but it may cause problems. So just rename it to destroy immediate, okay? So this will actually destroy our item only when we release the button, and this will trigger the consuming function. So inside the consuming function, we basically receive these values, and then we pass them into these separate methods, okay? One method that will calculate the health, one method that will calculate the calories, and one method that will calculate the hydration. And all of these methods are exactly the same. They simply do it on the health, on the calories, and on the hydration. And of course, before we consume it, we also want to make this item info UI invisible, right? Because over here, if we have this UI panel visible and then we consume the item and the item is destroyed, we don't want to show this panel anymore, okay? This panel, okay? So that's why we first hide it and then we perform the effects. So inside all of these methods, we simply receive the effect and then we check what is the current health, okay? So we go into our player state and we check the current health. Then we also get the max health. And then we check if the health effect that we got over here is not 0, it means that there is some kind of health effect that this item provides. Then check if the health before consumption, it means the current health plus the health effect that we're going to receive, if both of them together are more than the max health, then set the health to be the max health. And what all of this means? It means that we just don't want the health to be more than the max health. So if we have 50 health right now and the max health is 100, and then we ate some kind of apple, and the apple gives us 60 health points, right? Over here, the health effects is 60. So then if we're going to add 50 and 60, it will be 110. So it will be more than our max health. So we don't want this to happen. And if it's not going to reach beyond, we're going to set it to the current health plus the health effect, right? So if the current health is 50 and we get a health effect of 40 and our max health is 100, then there's nothing wrong with that, and we're simply going to set it to be 90. Okay? So this is what is going on over here. And we did the same thing with the calories and the hydration. So all of this calculation is exactly the same. We simply do it on all of these different stats. And you can see over here that we're referencing the player state. So as I told you in the previous episode, we're not changing things from other scripts. All of these calories and hydration, all of this we're going to change inside the player state. So we call this method set health, and then we pass in the new health. Okay? And these methods, the set health and set calories and set hydration, it's something that you need to add into your player state script. So if we go to the bottom, you simply need to add these things. Okay? Just create a method called set health that receives a float of new health and set the current health to be the new health. Okay? And the same thing with the calories and the hydration. So we make all of our changes inside the player state and we simply call it over here. Okay, so now we're going to go into our resources and we're going to create some kind of a test resource that we're going to be able to consume. Or actually, let's not do it. Let's just test it on the stick and stone. Of course, we cannot consume stones and sticks, but right now for the example, we're going to do that. So we click on the stick, and if we go into our inventory item script, we can see all of these effects that we need to provide it. And we also need to determine if it's a consumable. Of course, a stick will not be consumable, but this is just for testing. So we're going to set the stick to be consumable, but the stone will not be consumable. And then the stick, we're also going to add about 10 health points, 100 calories, and 2 hydration percent. Okay? So now if we run the game, and we pick up a stick and a stone, let's take another stone and another stick. And also let's open the crafting system so you can see that these things change when we consume them. So now if I click on the stone, nothing will happen, okay? Right click, left click, nothing will happen. If I left clicked on the stick, again, nothing will happen. But if I right click on the stick, let's just reduce a bit of the health. And let's walk a bit. So if I right click on the stick, you see that we got 10 health points, we got some calories, and it was beyond 2000, so it just limited at 2000, and we got 2% of hydration, and the stick disappeared, and here we see only one stick. And we can also see that this stick was consumed and not this stick. Okay? So this works. And of course, later we're going to add foods and drinks, and we're going to create more resources and more items, and each item will have different values. Okay, now the last thing we're going to do today is create the option to throw away items. So to do that, we're going to go into our inventory system and we're going to create a new empty object and we're going to call it trash. Okay, trash slot. Let's just call it trash. And then we're going to drag it and place it inside our inventory somewhere over here. Let's make it a bit smaller. And we're going to add an image component, and the sprite will be some kind of border. Okay, so now it looks like a slot that we can drop our items to be deleted. And then inside this trash, we're going to create another empty object and we're going to call it background, and inside of it we're going to place an image, and the sprite will be one of these two sprites. Okay, so we have a closed trash can and we have an open trash can. So we're going to place this closed trash can, okay, and we're going to make it a little bit smaller. And now we're going to create another UI. So not inside the inventory screen, but inside the canvas, we're going to create an empty object and we're going to call it deletion alert, right? Because usually when the player wants to delete something, we need to ask him, do you really want to delete it? Because we don't want him to throw away something by mistake, some kind of valuable thing, right? So this deletion alert will go over here somewhere. It will be this size. We're going to place it in the middle. And then we're going to add a text component. And here it's going to be the question we're going to ask. And we're going to add an image for this deletion alert. It's going to be the background again, some kind of board. And we're going to place this. And then we're going to create two more buttons over here, UI button, UI button. The first one we're going to name yes. And the second one we're going to name no. And then inside, we're going to change the text to yes. No. And we're going to change the sprites to agree. I have this one and this one. And then we're going to drag the text underneath. Okay, nothing too fancy with the UI, just a basic alert. And now again, we need to go and create a script for this. So the second script we're going to have, and I'm going to add the link for it, is the trash slot script. Okay, so this is a class that will handle with all of this trashing and deleting of items. Okay, so just create a script called trash slot and paste all of the code inside. So let's open it. Let's first drag it on this trash object that is inside the inventory screen. Let's just place the trash slot script on this item, okay? And then we can also go and drag a reference to the deletion alert that we just created over here, trash alert UI. And we can also go and have two of these versions, the closed and the open, and we can drag them over there. So the closed will go over here and the open will go over here. And of course, I'm going to explain to you why we need all of these. And let's take this and make it invisible. So let's go over the trash slot script. First of all, we have a reference to the trash alert UI, which is this deletion alert. Then we have a reference to this text, which is this text that we're going to change, because if we're going to throw away an apple, we want to ask, do you want to throw away this apple, right? If we want to throw away some kind of stone, we need to ask, do you want to throw away this stone? So this question should always be different. So we're going to change it from the script with this reference. Then we have references for these two sprites, right? This one and this one, because what we basically want to do is when we grab our item and we drag it over here, we want this trash to open when we're here. And when we move out, then we want it to close. It's just some kind of nice effect so the player knows when he can actually drop the item. And of course, you're going to see that in action. So we need a reference to both of these sprites so we can change them when the player hovers over here. So to do this hover, we're going to use the same interfaces we used in the script before, right? So when we hover with our dragged item, we use this one, and then when we exit, we use this one. Then we take a reference to this image component, which is the image component over here because we want to change these sprites. So we want a reference to this image component so we can change the different sprites, okay? And then we have a reference to these two buttons because we need to say what will happen when we click on each one of them. And then we have a game object that is called dragged item. And this is the item that we're actually going to drag. So we're always going to keep a reference for it. And we're simply going to create a get method that will always get the value of this dragged item. And we're going to get it from the drag and drop script. Because inside the drag and drop script, if you remember from previous episodes, we always keep track of the item that we're dragging. So when we start dragging it, then we get it and we can place it over here and then we can use it. Because it will always change, so we cannot just reference it one time in the start method because it won't work. We need to always get it, right? So that's why we use this get method. And then we also have a reference to the item to be deleted. And again, it's something that we need to store in order to not delete other items. Because if we have two sticks in our inventory and then we're going to drag one into the trash can, we don't want the other one to disappear. And then we also get the item name, and we do that by going to the item to be deleted. And we get the name. And here we simply do this cleaning process that we did before. We simply remove the clone from the name and we give the result with the new name. Okay, so if it's Axe clone, it will result Axe. And then the item name will be Axe. So in the start method, we get some references. First of all, we get the image component from the background, right? This image component. Then we also get a reference to the text to modify. And then we get a reference to both of these buttons. And we also add a click listener to both of them. So when we click on the yes button, this method will be called. And when we click on the no button, this method will be called. So now that we got all of these references, we're going to deal with these methods that come with these interfaces. So first of all, we have the onDrop, and we used this method before inside our item slot script, if you remember, because this will trigger when an item is dropped on this item. Okay, so we use this method that comes with this interface, and here we basically just check if this dragged item is trashable. And you remember that inside the inventory item, we had a boolean that tracks if the item is trashable. So here we check if this item is trashable. So if it's a quest item, maybe we don't want it to be trashable. We don't want the player to throw it away. But if it's some kind of junk, then we do want to make it trashable. So only if this item is trashable, then make this item the item to be deleted. So now we know that this exact game object is the item that we want to delete, and start a coroutine because we want to show this notification, right? This notification, and we want to do it on a coroutine. So we want to do it on a background thread. So we start a coroutine with this method, this coroutine notify before deletion, and inside of it, we simply show this trash alert UI, this one, and we change the text to throw away this item name question mark, and we wait 1 second. So now it will open this menu over here and it will wait for us to press on yes or no. So if we click on cancel, it will close the panel and it will also change the sprite, this sprite, back to closed, right? Because if we hover over it, it will be opened, but when we click on cancel or when we move away, it will become closed again. So this is what we're doing here. But if we decide to delete the item, then again, we're also going to make it closed and we're going to destroy the item. And which item we're going to destroy? The item to be deleted, okay? And we recalculate the inventory list, we recalculate the crafting system list, and we also make the trash alert UI invisible, okay? So this is the way we're going to throw away and delete these items. Now we also have these methods, and this is basically just for when we hover and drag our item over here, this sprite will become this open trash sprite, okay? And when we hover out of this area, it will become this closed trash again. So for this, we're going to use these two methods that we also used before. And here we'll simply check if the item that is dragged is not null. So we basically say, if we're coming here with the mouse without any item, we don't want to change it to open, right? We only want to change it to open when we have an item that we're dragging. So this is what we check here. And we also want to check if this dragged item is trashable. Only if it's trashable, we want to change the sprite to be opened. And we do the opposite when we exit. Again, we check that it's not null and we check that it's trashable because we wanted the same conditions. And then we simply change it to trash closed, okay? And you're going to see that in action right now. So this is all the code, and let's see if we need some references for that. So we go into our trash, and okay, we already have all the references. So now we can simply go to our resources, and let's make stick trashable, but let's keep the stone not trashable, okay? So now let's run the game. So if I'm going to take this stone and I'm going to hover over here, nothing will happen because the stone is marked as untrashable. And also if I come here with the mouse, nothing will happen. But if I'm going to drag this stick that is trashable over here, you can see that this trash can is opening up. So the player knows that it can be dropped. And then when we drop it, it will ask us if we want to throw away the stick. If we say no, nothing will happen. If we say yes, this item will be deleted. And not this item, right? Because both of them are sticks, but will destroy this exact game object. And also inside our crafting system counter, it will already know that there's only one stick because we said destroy immediate. Over here, right? So again, if we are going to use destroy, it's going to wait until the next frame, but we need to recalculate these lists, so we do want to destroy it right away. So when these happen, they will know that the item doesn't exist anymore. So that's basically all. We can now hover over these items and see information. We can throw away items and we can consume items. Of course, later we're going to add more things, more consumables and more blueprints, and things will look a bit more like a full game, but right now we just want to build all of these features. So that's all for this episode. In the next episode, I really hope that we can start working on equipping our tools and using our tools, right? Usually in survival games, we have some kind of bar over here with items that we can select. If we press on 1 or 2, then we select them. So we want to be able to select these tools. And then when we selected them, we can use them. So we're going to be able to equip the axe and then use it on trees and chop down woods. Of course, it's something that will come later, but first we want to deal with equipping our tools and actually seeing them in our hands. And there's a lot more planned for the future, a lot of things that I'm thinking about, but it really takes time to add more and more things. So thank you for watching. Please leave a like and also subscribe if you're still not subscribed. It will help me a lot, it will show your support, and it will give me motivation to continue with this series. So thank you for watching and see you next time.